can't just cut ourselves off from West Africa, where this disease is raging. Our medical experts tell us that the best way to stop this disease is to stop it at its source, before it spreads even wider and becomes even more difficult to contain. Trying to seal off an entire region of the world, if that were even possible, could actually make the situation worse. It would make it harder to move healthcare workers and supplies back and forth. Experience shows that it could also cause people in the affected region to change their travel, to evade screening, and make the disease even harder to track.
All right, that was the president talking about why we can't shut ourselves off from the rest of the world. We can't have a travel ban from Western Africa, et cetera, et cetera. Rejoining us on the Malzberg panel, Dr. Betsy McCaughey and Dr. Erika Schwartz. And let me start with you, Betsy. You were saying that you had talked to Doctors Without Borders, and I do want to stress this, that how insane it is, that they told you that a person could be treating an Ebola patient one day, and later that day could be on a plane back to the United States or anywhere else without any incubation period.
They said there's no waiting period required before a caregiver who's been in direct contact with Ebola patients has to wait before flying home on a commercial airline. That is wrong. And let me also point out that the newest research in the New England Journal of Medicine shows that only 87% of people who contract Ebola have a fever before they're diagnosed. So there's a big hole in the screening process.
Yeah, it's like they're making it up as they go along. But let me ask you, Erika, if today we're hearing that the U.S. is considering mandatory quarantine of returning healthcare workers and anybody who comes back, like the NBC News health reporter who broke her voluntary quarantine, Nancy Snyderman. Do you think that's a good idea, mandatory quarantine from anybody who's come in contact with anybody who has Ebola?
Well, I think it makes sense because, you know what, you're trying to really protect the public. So you're talking about individual care versus public health. And this is a public health hazard that is in West Africa, and we don't want to have it here. And the thing is, I commend the people who go and help there. It's always the healthcare workers who put themselves on the line. But the thing is, they should not be brought back in, like Betsy just said, directly from taking care of Ebola people, since we don't really know that gap. We don't know when we actually become contagious.
Right, a lot of the information is arbitrary.
And let me make it clear that the quarantine, the isolation period should be in Africa, not after the caregivers return here, because the whole key is to keep it out of our hospitals.
Right.
Well, we could all hold our breath before that happens. Yeah. Let me ask you, Erika, vaccine. We're here now. I'm hearing every day that Johnson & Johnson is developing an Ebola vaccine, experimental Ebola vaccine, and 2015, which is next year, could be the year that we make all this progress against Ebola. How close, realistically, do you believe we are to a vaccine, and is this something you would take?
I would never take the vaccine. This is the first thing. I actually think that, you know, we can always make money off of somebody's misfortune. This is the American way. It's like, let's see who can make money off of it. Now we have West Africa, where these people are actually dying, and they should be taken care of. But then why Glaxo, the Canadian companies, everybody's jumping in and so generously throwing in hundreds of millions of dollars at developing the vaccine? Why don't we focus on what the debate of the protocols of how to prevent this thing from spreading and how to help the people in West Africa from getting it? So I think the vaccine is a way to make money because we don't even know about efficacy. It'll take years to know when a vaccine is efficacious, it's safe. We don't know any of these things.
Betsy?
Yes, let me also point out that when a patient does arrive in the United States and is diagnosed with Ebola, that person should be treated only at one of the 4 biocontainment hospitals in the United States: Maryland, Georgia, Nebraska, and Montana. Those are the 4 places that are built for this, that are equipped, the staff are trained, and they have a record.
Then why don't they get this doctor out of New York?
That's exactly where he should be, because our New York hospitals are going to suffer, and our healthcare workers in New York are going to be at risk if they are named, as Andrew Cuomo has said, super centers for Ebola. That is a terrible mistake on this governor's part. It's a terrible gamble with the health of New Yorkers.
You know what? We don't even know, actually. Before you say that they should be evacuated, they should be moved, we don't really know how it's really transmitted, besides the fact that once they have enough of a viral load and they get sick. We don't know the beginning. We don't know how this doctor got sick. We don't know how any of the health workers got sick, except for the woman who said, she wasn't, she touched the equipment. But this is the thing. We know so little, and all we're doing is the less information we have, the more we get scared.
Right.
So we need information, and we need people who actually represent the public interest and the individuals.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I have the utmost confidence in Barack Obama and his Ebola SWAT teams. I understand one is on the way to New York, so we're all safe because he's got a SWAT team coming. And the man in charge of keeping us safe at the CDC wanted to ban 16-ounce sodas, so he must be on the ball. Dr. Betsy McCaughey, Dr. Erika Schwartz, thank you both. Very informative, very, very interesting. And we'll be back with former New York City Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik right after the break, but first, we're going to check in on the Illinois gubernatorial race with our Road to the Midterms update next on Newsmax Television.
In the world of sports, most fans are loyal to their teams no matter what. In Illinois, history would indicate Democrats are loyal to their politicians. Current Governor Pat Quinn's predecessor, Democrat Rod Blagojevich, managed to get reelected in 2006 despite being linked to numerous scandals at the time, currently serving prison time on corruption charges. And when President Obama's approval ratings were tanking around the country, voters in his home state held out. According to a New York Times YouGov poll, he just recently dipped below 50% there. So the fact that a Republican has a Democrat worried about getting reelected in Illinois paints an interesting political picture. GOP candidate and businessman Bruce Rauner is looking to oust Quinn. Two are neck and neck in the polls, although the most recent surveys put Quinn ahead, but just barely. The New York Daily News reports Illinois' financial troubles are one reason why the race is so close. Quinn didn't quite deliver during his first term to curb the state's fiscal problems. That's why Rauner's campaign is largely focused on improving the state's economic situation. He's also touting a plan for a better education system, both of which are playing well with undecided voters. But Illinois may ultimately be just too blue for Rauner to pull out a victory. In 2010, Quinn's challenger also polled well, but when it came down to it, Democrats went to bat for their candidate.